Hi everyone, today our group will be presenting an optical instrument which is a telescope. So let's get started with the principle and lens function of telescope.
Assalamualaikum and hi, my name is Nur Syafiqah Patricia binti Muhammad Patricia and my metric number is BC253329. And now I will explain the principle of a telescope. But before we discuss the components of a telescope, let us first understand what is a telescope and how it works. A telescope is an optical instrument that allows us to observe distant objects such as stars, planets, and galaxies. It works by collecting and focusing lights from these objects, making them appear brighter and larger than what we can see with our naked eye. The principle of a refracting telescope is based on two important concepts, which is refraction and magnification. When light from a distant object enters the telescope, it first passes through the objective lens, which is the large lens located at the front of the telescope. Because the object is far away, the incoming light rays are nearly parallel. The objective lens refracts or bends these light rays towards one another until they meet at a point called a focal point. And then at this focal point, the objective lens forms real inverted image of the distant object. However, this image is usually small and cannot be observed clearly. To solve this, the eyepiece lens is placed near the focal point, and then the eyepiece will act like a magnifying glass and will enlarge the image formed by the objective lens. As a result, the observer sees a much larger and a clearer image of the distant object. Therefore, the working principle of a refracting telescope can be summarized in three steps. First, the objective lens collects light, and second, it focuses the lights to form an image, and third, the eyepiece magnifies that image for our observation. This is how a refracting telescope enables us to view distant celestial objects in greater detail.
Hello, my name is Mazinda Ahmad. My metric number is BC253067. So I will explain about the lens function of telescope. So as we know that our telescope actually have two lenses, which is objective lens and eyepiece lens. So for the objective, it's actually located to front end and refracting lens. It's actually like a big window that facing to the sky, like this one sky, and then it faces to the sky. So actually these two lenses have different function. So for the objective lens, it actually gather the light and bring it to a focus. This is what allows us to see incredibly faint objective and like a distant galaxies and nebula. So for the and then second, it works like refraction and focusing. This lens actually curve like convex on both sides. So when parallel light ray from a distant star pass through it, the glass slow down and bend the lights. So it converging all the ray into a single point that called focal point. So for the eyepiece lens, it's located to our eyes, as we see here. It's actually magnifying glasses. It's actually magnify the object. So the eyepiece that takes tiny image and magnify it and spreading it out across to our retina, so our brain can perceive the detail. And the second part is collumination. It straightens the diverging light ray coming from focal point, turning that back into parallel rays so that our eyes can easily focus the image without any strain.
We will demonstrate how we constructed our Keplerian telescope model. First, we measured 30 centimeters in width and 30 centimeters in length on a sheet of paper. Next, we cut the paper to obtain a 30 centimeter by 30 centimeter square. Then, we repeated the same step to create another identical 30 centimeter by 30 centimeter square. After that, we measured 6 centimeters in width and 30 centimeters in length on another sheet of paper. Next, we cut the paper to obtain a strip measuring 6 centimeters by 30 centimeters. Then, we took one of the 30 centimeters by 30 centimeter sheets and rolled it around a 60 millimeters lens. After rolling the paper, we secured it in place to form the first tube of the telescope. Next, we took the second 30 centimeters by 30 centimeter sheet and rolled it around the first tube. This created a second tube that fitted around the first one. After that, we took the 6 centimeter by 30 centimeter strip and rolled it around the second 60 millimeter lens. We then secured it to form the eyepiece tube. Next, we attached the eyepiece tube to the end of the telescope. Finally, we assembled all the parts together. Once the assembly was complete, we adjusted the position of the tubes until a clear image of a distant object was obtained. With that, the construction of our Keplerian telescope model was successfully completed.
So next I will be explaining about the ray diagram of a reflecting telescope based on this layout. we will follow the path of light from the moment it enters the system until it reaches our eye. So to begin with, let's look at the two red lines on the far left, labeled as light from a distant object. Because the object is very far away, this light will travel parallel to each other and parallel to the center dash line, which is known as the principal axis. So basically, it has three lines that are parallel to each other, which is the light ray travel and the dash line, which is principal axis. So next, this incoming light rays travel all the way to the right side of the telescope tube, where they strike the primary concave mirror. As you can see from the diagram, this mirror is curved inward because the light ray touch its inside. So this curvature will reflect the light ray inward, angling them back toward the left side of telescope, which means the light ray travel then reflect to the left side. Before those reflected rays can meet, they are intercepted on the left by the secondary convex mirror. So there are two mirrors, which is convex and concave and convex. The first one is concave, the second one is convex. So notice the dashed red lines be outside the secondary convex mirror. They show where the light would have gone. Instead, the secondary convex mirror reflects the light rays a second time, sending them back toward the right, narrowing down as they head toward the center of the primary mirror. It means that when the light ray first travel to the primary, it will reflect down to the left, which is it has a virtual line outside the secondary mirror, while the light ray will reflect back to the center of the primary convex mirror, concave mirror, my bad. Then, finally, the light ray pass through a small opening in the middle of the primary concave mirror. They cross over each other right at the opening and pass directly through the final optical component labeled the eyepiece. The eyepiece straightens out the rays so they can be clearly viewed by an observer. So that concludes the step-by-step path of reflection in this telescope diagram.
Now I will explain the ray diagram in a reflecting telescope. This diagram over here illustrates the optical principle of a reflecting telescope, which employs two convex lenses, which are the objective and the eyepiece. Firstly, the rays from the distant object will reach the objective lens, and since the objective lens have a higher focal length, it will converge these rays to form a real inverted image at its focal length, at its focal plane. The image here is denoted as P prime Q prime. Next, the eyepiece lens, which has a much shorter focal length, will act as a magnifier. It will take the real image formed by the objective just now and produces a final virtual image over here that appears larger and which are at a comfortable viewing distance for the observer. To summarize it, the essential function of the objective lens is to gather and focus the light, while the eyepiece magnifies the image. Both of these lenses combined allows astronomer to observe distant celestial bodies with enhanced clarity and scale. It is also important to note that the image produced is inverted, which is acceptable in astronomical observation. Now, I will explain about telescope magnification. The magnification of a telescope is defined by the ratio of the focal length to that of the eyepiece lens, which are mathematically expressed as m equal to f0 over fe, where the f0 represents the objective lens and the fe is representing the focal length of eyepiece lens. The relationship highlights two important design considerations. The longer objective focal length increases the size of the intermediate image, while a shorter eyepiece focal length enhances the degree of magnification. Together, these parameters determine how much larger and closer the final image appears to the observer. For instance, if the objective lens have a focal length of 100 cm and the eyepiece lens have a focal length of 5 cm, the magnification is calculated as m.
I will explain the properties of the final image produced by a refracting telescope. The first property is that the image is virtual. A visual image cannot be projected onto a screen because the light rays do not actually meet at the image position. Instead, the image can only be observed through the eyepiece. The second property is that the image is inverted. This means the image appears upside down relative to the object being viewed. This happens because the objective lens first forms a real inverted image before it is magnified by the eyepiece. The third property is that the image is magnified. The eyepiece acts like a magnifying glass, making the image appear larger than the actual object. This enables use to observe distant objects such as stars, planets, and galaxies. Another important characteristic is that under normal adjustment, the final image is formed at infinity. This condition provides the most comfortable viewing experience because the human eye remains relaxed while observing the image. So, why is the final image formed at infinity? Let us now look at why the final image is formed at infinity. When observing distant objects, the light rays arriving at the telescope are almost parallel. These parallel rays enter the objective lens and are focused to form a real image at the focal point of the objective lens. In normal adjustment of a telescope, this real image is positioned exactly at the focal point of the eyepiece lens. The eyepiece then acts as a magnifier. Since the object for the eyepiece is located at its focal point, the ray emerging from the eyepiece become a parallel. Parallel rays indicate that the final image is located at infinity. As a result, the observer does not need to exert additional effort to focus the eyes. Therefore, forming the image at infinity reduces eye strain, provide a comfortable viewing experience, and allow prolonged observation of distant objects. First, studying planetary surface. Using image data, scientists can closely examine further like craters, mountains, and even atmospheric pattern. For example, a detailed image of planets such as Mars and Jupiter help researchers understand their composition and environmental conditions. Next, tracking satellites and space image allow scientists to monitor artificial satellites and detect space debris orbiting Earth. This is important for both scientific research and ensuring the safety of spacecraft by avoiding potential collision. Finally, measuring stellar properties through techniques like astrometry and photometry, image help estimate a star's brightness, position, and motion. This information is crucial for understanding how stars behave and evolve over time.
Now, let's quickly summarize the key points of our presentation. First of all, a telescope is a nautical instrument used to observe distant objects by collecting and focusing light. This is what allows us to see objects that are far beyond the reach of our eyes. Secondly, a telescope works based on the principles of refraction or reflection and produces angular magnification. In simple terms, it makes distant objects appear larger and easier to observe. But the main components of a telescope are the objective lens or mirror and the eyepiece. These parts work together to form and magnify the image that we see. Next, telescopes increase the angular size of distant objects, making them appear clearer and closer. This is why they are such important tools in astronomy. Moving on. The magnifying power of a telescope depends on the focal length of the objective and the eyepiece. Different focal lengths produce different levels of magnification. And in addition, different types of telescopes, such as refracting and reflecting telescopes, are specially designed to reduce optical defects like chromatic and spherical aberration, which helps improve image quality. Finally, telescopes play a crucial role in astronomy, space exploration, and scientific research. They have allowed humanity to discover new planets, study distant galaxies, and better understand our universe. Let's take an example. Like the James Webb Space Telescope has provided incredibly detailed images of distant galaxies, helping scientists to learn more about the origin of the universe. And to wrap up, as Carl Sagan said, somewhere something incredible is waiting to be known. I believe that this quote perfectly captures the purpose of telescopes. They are, how can I say, they help us explore the unknown and expand the limits of human knowledge. And all right, that's all for our presentation. Thank you for your attention.